Okay, you're all set to begin. All right, the floor is yours, Hilda.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Hilda Hay, and we're about to start our housing committee meeting. Today is November 9th, and we call this meeting to order. Let's see everybody. Meeting is called to order. Notice, is there anybody recording this meeting? And if there's a no, first on our agenda this evening, we have our new member, Emily Hornet. I'm not sure, is she here yet, Fran?
Yes, she is. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce everybody to Emily Cornett, who's been Cornett or Cornett? How do you pronounce it, Emily?
Cornett.
Cornett. Great. Thank you for joining us. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to share about yourself, just a brief introduction, and let folks get to know you and what you hope to bring to the committee.
Yeah, of course. My name is Emily Cornett. I am a residential loan officer at Loan Depot. I live in Hyannis, so I could walk to town hall from here. So what I hope to bring to the committee is my knowledge of, at least from the buy side, of how to help locals with housing. And I think I have a unique perspective in that I do understand some of the challenges and some ways to help address those challenges. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. And I think we can go around the room and just introduce ourselves so that Emily may just know who we are. And you want to start, Ryan?
Sure. So I'm Ryan Bennett, the town's housing coordinator and staff support to this committee.
Lori?
Hi, I'm Lori Finton. I'm the director of Barnstable Housing Authority.
Hi, Donald. Go ahead. Donald? I don't think he's hearing me.
We also, other committee members, we have our Don Lind.
Is he hearing us? I'm not sure.
You're on mute, Don. There we go.
So you can't just read my lips. Okay, I'm Don Lyon from Marston's Mills. An attorney for 20 years in Waltham while I was in the Army Reserve, and then I did 14 years active duty, and then I did another 14 years in private practice here on the Cape. Just want to do what we can. The housing is so important. People don't understand the heartache, the psychology, even suicide of not having a place to go and get your thoughts collected, get some peace and quiet. I hope we can help.
Thank you. And what else do we have?
Megan Mort we have as well.
Healthcare and a housing advocate. Thanks for joining us.
Well, we welcome you, Emily, to our meeting, and we look forward to working with you. I should reintroduce myself to you. My name is Hilda Hay. I am the current chair of the Barnstable Housing Committee. I've been on this committee for my second session. I am a diagnostic technician. I work at Cape Hospital, and I am willing to work with anyone and everyone to make our communities on the Cape livable for a lot of the working class people. And we're here as a team, and we welcome you and hope we'll get some good ideas going and get some work on the ground. So thank you.
Thank you all for having me. And I look forward to meeting all of you as well.
Ryan, can we have the housing production project plan and get an update?
Yes, so next item on the agenda is the Housing Production Plan Project Update. And for this, I will hand it over to our consultant team. We're joined tonight by Laura Smead of J.M. Goldson, Jen Goldson of J.M. Goldson, who will give us a presentation on where we are in the process, which will, I believe, include a preliminary discussion of some early goals and strategies that will be a priority recommendation of the plan. So I will hand it over to Laura and Jen.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, we're really happy to be here. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. It's good to see some familiar faces here. You should have gotten ahead of time, I think last week sometime, a list of draft goals and strategy ideas. And that's really what we want to talk about. We are very collaborative in the way that we do this. And what we like to do is just put out some ideas that we've heard from the focus groups, the interviews, the forum, and some ideas that we've had ourselves from going through your zoning bylaw and understanding your local capacity and your development constraints. And so we've put together this preliminary list, and we really just want to go through it with you and see if you have other ideas. One thing we'd love to do, and I think Laura will get into this more when she goes through the strategies, we think we have too many strategies. And so if there's a way to maybe start to prioritize a little bit, this is just a 5-year plan, so we don't want to overload the community with a lot of ideas that they can't possibly get to. So something to think about as we go forward in that part of the discussion. But I think, Laura, do you have ability to share your screen?
I do, but you can also be given that power as well if you'd rather.
No, I think you should do it, and then you can take over on the strategy part.
Okay. I'm not sure I have the most recent version though. So just give me a minute. I will.
Oh, yep. Yeah, poor Laura, because about 5 minutes before we started the meeting, I made a couple of changes to the presentation. So she's trying to make sure she's got the most recent one. But what I'll say is that we're in a very, this is like the planning, the most planning part of the process in some ways, because we've heard a bunch of, perspectives, and now what we're trying to understand is what direction you want to go in. And so when we get into the goals and strategies, we want to understand, do you think we're hearing you right? Do you think we're kind of interpreting your needs in the best way possible that is reflected in the goals? And then do you think we're putting forward ideas that fall into those buckets? So you saw in the goals and strategies handout that we had 3 buckets of strategies. Some deal with planning and zoning, some deal with local initiatives and programs, and some deal with capacity and collaboration. All right, so why don't we start? Thanks, Laura, for pulling that up. So
Jen,
I'm Jen.
Sorry to interrupt. I did want to just say, so I haven't shared the goals and strategies that you sent to me with this body yet. I wanted this forum to be the public facing introduction of that, and then we'll begin to collect some feedback afterwards, but I can provide it.
I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you guys had a little time to digest that, so that's fine. So what we'll do is we'll go through it with a little more detail then, knowing that you haven't seen it yet. And if you don't have an opinion today, that's fine. You can get us some feedback, soon would be good, because we're having the public forum soon, and we want to really understand what we should be presenting at the forum for more feedback. And so we'd really like to vet it first with you before we go into the forum with some ideas. If you think any of the ideas are, non-starters, that's really good for us to know. Okay, so again, I'm Jen Goldson, and Laura Smead is here too, who you know already. So why don't we just go to the next slide? And so we'll talk, I'll just start a little bit with the project schedule to let us know where we are in this process. And then we'll go into that draft goals and strategies. And we can send out a PDF of these, of this to you so that you can have that to look at more carefully after this meeting. Okay, next. So this is the schedule, and you'll see that we're in the November 9th Housing Committee meeting number 3, reviewing the outline of goals and strategy ideas. And then we have the community forum coming up in 3 weeks. And that's where we really want to present ideas. Now, usually we don't present all of the strategies. Some of the strategies maybe are, continue this or continue that, and maybe you don't need public feedback on every single one. But really looking at the more substantive policy decisions for getting more public feedback and trying to understand, anything that might be controversial, it's actually good to put out at this point as well to get some initial early feedback. And then we'll meet with you again next month and we'll review the forum results. And that at that point, we'll be preparing the full draft plan. And so that will include a whole chapter that will really flesh out the ideas for goals and strategies. And at that point, you'll start to see a lot more substance to them. And we'll submit that just before the holidays. 12/22 is our deadline to get that final chapter to you. And then we'll meet with you in January and revise the plan as needed and then release it for public comment. And then if you move over to the February-March column there, then we'll, I think that date is confirmed, February 6th. Somebody tell me if I'm misspeaking. We'll present the draft plan to the planning board, a joint meeting of the planning board, the housing committee, and is it not the city council as well? It is the city council too.
That comes later. So
Oh,
first-
I'm sorry. Okay, the town
That-
council.
That February 6th date is not firmed yet, but I would say that's our target date.
Okay, great. That sounds good. So we'll present it to the planning board first, and then we'll revise based on their comments, and then we'll present it to the town council and the planning board as revised. And then they usually vote afterwards. And so we're hoping to submit by the end of March with a locally approved plan. So does anyone, I know, Emily, you're brand new to this. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also don't want you to feel like you can't ask what is going on. Jen just skipped over a whole bunch of things. I'm happy to kind of back up a little bit. If anyone has questions on what we're doing and why we're doing the way we're doing it, what the plan is all about, yeah, just let me know. Does anyone have any questions or want me to elaborate on anything? Okay. All right, great. So why don't we go to the next slide? So there are 5 draft goals that we wrote up, and they really largely reflect, they're somewhat similar to the goals that were there before, but I think a little bit different. We've really revised them based on what we've heard and what we think are your priorities now in terms of housing needs and sort of the emphasis that we heard from the engagement so far. Now, these are not in any special order. So if you prefer them to be ordered in a different way, that's certainly on the table. But the first one we're presenting tonight is just the production goal. We call this the production goal. And this is when you do a housing production plan, part of what you need to do is figure out, how are you going to get to 10%? And so achieve and maintain the state's goal, that 10% of year-round units count on your subsidized housing inventory. But then we also say, and this is the part that we don't have to say necessarily, while also addressing documented local needs and regional needs. And so the rest of the goals really talk a little bit more in detail about what that would mean and how you would do that. But we just elaborated here a little bit. This includes, but is not limited to, affordable year-round senior housing, affordable year-round rental and ownership housing, housing for residents with special needs, as well as seasonal and year-round options for employees of the town and local businesses. So you'll see some of these things have nothing to do with the subsidized housing inventory, and that's okay because they're really trying to target your local needs as well. And we can always go back to these, but why don't you go to the next slide for now? So the second of the 5 is ensure that new development promotes smart growth and protection of natural resources. We talk about especially in Barnstable's village centers near public transportation and where sewer infrastructure is available. Next goal. is assist in stabilizing housing and providing housing assistance programs and services for the most vulnerable residents of Barnstable, especially those living in inadequate housing conditions, which Donald talked a bit about in your intro, homelessness or at risk of homelessness. Next is the fourth of 5 goals: preserve local capacity to implement. So you have good local capacity, and the idea here is to preserve that local capacity to implement housing initiatives that come out of this plan, for example, and strengthen working partnerships. You also have a lot of local and regional organizations working on these issues from different angles of these issues. And so this is about strengthening those working partnerships and maintaining that capacity that you do have. Next. And last goal that we came up with, and there's not a magic number here, there can be more or less goals: promote greater public awareness and understanding of Barnstable's housing crisis, encouraging enhanced housing advocacy by a broad cross-section of the community to solidify and build community support for future housing development efforts, and also nurture strong leadership within the town to promote housing initiatives. So this is a little bit of a different slant. The number 4 is really about local capacity to get things done, to implement things, and to have collaborations. And this one is more about public awareness and leadership and advocacy. So those are the 5 goals. And before we get into strategies, I'd love to just pause here. And I know you're just seeing this for the first time. So, I'm a processor. I don't typically have comments the moment I hear something for the first time. So if you don't, that's fine. I think we can talk about how long, we can give you to get us comments. But if you do have any first instincts on what you think of these, if you feel like they're customized enough for Barnstable, if you feel like they're the right 5 goals, or if you want to, we can talk about tweaking them, or we can talk about overhauling them. We're not wed to these. And again, 5 is not a magic number, and the order, is not critical, but can certainly be adjusted. So I just wonder, does anyone have any first reactions? And I'm happy to go back and review any of these. And I'm just looking for hands, but you can also just unmute and speak up if you'd like. If I see a hand, though, I will call it.
So I'm on the road. I can't really raise my hand. This is Megan.
Hi, Megan.
And I can't really see the presentation. So maybe I'm missing something pretty important. But my first impression is that so far what I've heard speaks to affordable housing for the most vulnerable, which is good. I mean, that's always a goal that we should have, but it doesn't speak to me about housing needs in general, especially for those who don't qualify for any affordable programs or affordable housing. Like it doesn't scream working class needs help.
Yeah, maybe we were too subtle on that point. I think we tried to get at that when we talked about addressing local housing needs, and we talked about year-round rental and ownership, but you're right, that was specifically affordable. But then we added on as well as seasonal and year-round options for employees of the town and local businesses. So I think you're right, maybe we didn't get at that more middle income, as you had described, more workforce type housing. And I don't know if others have that same reaction. We're happy to either add a goal specifically around that, and I don't see another hand, but I'm just curious what other folks think of that.
This is Hilda, and I certainly agree with what Megan just suggested, because what we're finding is that most of our young people, professional workers who work, that they can't afford to live on the Cape, and a lot of people are have moved, and a lot more are looking to move somewhere that is more affordable. So that also has to be one of our main goals, to keep young people inside in Barnstable and a whole around Cape Cod.
So Hilda, I'm hearing young people. I'm hearing workforce, professional. You use the word professional workers and workforce. I'm hearing from Megan more middle income, more working class, I think was the phrase you used. But I think that gets at like kind of not just affordable housing that counts on the subsidized housing inventory, but more middle income housing as well.
Certainly.
Right. Anyone else have a thought about that or something else?
I think one of the keywords I would like, rather than using affordable, we need capital A affordable, that's pretty well known, but when you're speaking to year-round workforce housing, you know, professional housing, people that, again, don't qualify for anything, I think using words like attainable or accessible are pretty key, because then that speaks to housing as a whole. And again, I don't have anything in front of me to look at, so I'm not trying to be like nitpicky, but
Okay.
that's what
Okay.
that's just what I heard. So that's it. That's it.
Yeah, those are great points. Anyone else have any thoughts on either that? Anyone want to second that, or not officially? I'm not talking about Robert's rules. Or any other things that you feel like are missing or you don't want to see emphasized in these goals as we wrote them. Paula, I think
I just have a question, since we have obviously done housing production plans in the past. How do these 5 goals differ or are similar to the goals that we've had in previous production plans?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know off the top of my head. Laura really took the lead on writing these. So Laura, I'm actually curious. I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you say these are, I think we tried to condense them a little bit from what I remember.
Yeah, the previous plan had a few more goals. So here we're, I think the last plan had a particular emphasis on, say, intergenerational housing, for example. Here we're talking kind of, it's almost like a list of the different groups that we're targeting. So it could be that at the end of the day, these goals might wind up looking a little more similar to the last round if we start breaking these out or emphasizing certain groups like young people or workforce housing. This goal is very similar to the one last time, which is, smart growth, balancing open space and housing needs. And I think the sewer expansion here also opens up new opportunities for more housing, which would fit that definition. And this one has a little bit of a new tweak to it. I think there was a goal related to sort of programs and services, but in here we're really making a point of emphasizing the most vulnerable people at risk of homelessness or may have experienced some housing instability. And this is similar to one, this is a common one, right? To maintain and preserve and strengthen the relationships that you have. And I think this, we also have a little more emphasis, I think, on the public awareness. We're calling it a housing crisis. I don't think we called it a housing crisis 5 years ago. And last time we did talk about nurturing strong local leadership, but here we're also talking about enhancing the housing advocacy as well locally, to kind of work with your local leaders together to really implement the strategy that we end up with here. So there was a few more, I think, strategies, but they got a little more condensed. I think, especially in that a few more goals. They got a little condensed in the first goal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, I mean, I think, Laura, how long before, when would you want comments by? Would a week work, or what do you think? I know the holiday's coming up too.
Yeah, I think a week would be fine.
Does that sound good if you wanted to take some time over the next week to kind of mull this over, maybe look back at the initial chapters that we had written up about housing needs and give us any feedback you have. And when we do the forum, we can integrate your feedback. Okay, great. And I think if you just send those to Ryan, Ryan can just forward them on to us. All right, great. So why don't, Laura, you want to go through strategies? I think the next slide is the 3 categories.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, so the strategies belong in 3 different buckets, and each bucket of these strategies right now they have around maybe 9 to 11 strategies in each, which is really kind of a long list. And we already tried to consolidate them a bit, but we'd love to get your feedback on ones that there could be consolidated, or maybe it's not something we can really do, or or maybe they all need to stay because they're all super important. So that's where we want to get your feedback. But each slide is going to have about 4 or 5 of them on there, and I'll read them aloud because I know not all of you can see the screen, and then we can kind of go through them. I would say if there's a strategy that you feel like, yep, I agree with it as it's written, we don't have to talk about those. Just call out the ones where you're like, you know what, I would reword that, or I think we should not have that one, or so. Okay, so under planning, policies, and zoning strategies, these are really going to be more of your regulatory policy kind of ones. They're not, let me go back for a second. Okay, so planning, policy, and zoning, those are, rules, regulations, policies, plan. Local initiatives and programs are about kind of production and funding to some extent, and then capacity, education, and coordination. Education and coordination is pretty self-explanatory. Capacity can be either staff or funding. Okay, so planning, policies, and zoning. So the first strategy, again, not in any particular order, is to consider amending the zoning to reduce the minimum lot size or frontage requirement for all forms of housing, but where environmental conditions allow. So there's a big caveat to that. So this is about, oftentimes you might look at a community from what is existing on the ground versus what zoning will allow now. And oftentimes there, especially when you look at how housing has been built historically, there will be housing that is on the ground now that wouldn't be allowed under zoning today because the zoning has changed and adjusted. So the idea is there might be already somewhat of a denser form of housing that is still existing, that people are comfortable with, that is already in the community, that wouldn't be allowed under modern zoning. So this is asking to kind of evaluate, are there certain zones where you might be, hey, like, is this large of a lot size really necessary? I know you have to deal with septic constraints and things like that, but that's one way to get at allowing for more housing, because there would be more houses allowed on a certain space, and you're sort of don't have as much open space to work with anymore. So that's something to consider. The other one is, another one is consider strengthening the regulations on short-term rentals by adopting a 3% short-term rental community impact fee and dedicating the proceeds toward affordable housing purposes. So this is where I need a little bit of a check from you too. So when I looked at what communities have this additional local option of a 3% short-term rental community impact fee, I didn't see that Barnstable had opted into that yet. So I thought, but other communities on the Cape seem to have done this. So that was a question that I thought I'd put out there. It could be an additional source of funding for affordable housing. And the third one is consider using Barnstable's residential property tax exemption to tax seasonal or second homes at a higher rate than year-round residents. That's a suggestion so all of these, by the way, we did get there's always some community feedback and things that we've heard behind all of these strategies. They may have been sort of written in a more of a planner speak way, but there's community feedback that goes into all of these. So you already have a residential property tax exemption. I know you're considering to maybe this is something you've already considered, and maybe that's something we can rule out or not, but this would be a way to keep property taxes lower for year-round residents and have still maintain enough income, for your municipal service. And I believe it would be allowed under the provisions you already have in the state. So with the caveat that I'm not a lawyer. Okay, so number 4 is seek special legislation. This is where you're asking for extra permission from the state to provide tax breaks to landlords who rent to year-round residents, including accessory dwelling units, and to those who participate in the affordable accessory apartment program. So that's something that I know you're already considering some sort of tax relief or trying to strategize around that for the affordable accessory apartment program already. something you may need some extra permission from the state to do. But considering maybe a program for landlords who rent to year-round residents is another aspect of that you. And the fifth strategy on this slide is amending the zoning to incentivize development of affordable assisted or independent living units for low-income seniors, and such as expedited permitting, zoning relief, and density bonuses. So that's targeting your senior population in particular. Any questions or feedback or anything on this page so far?
Do you know how the 3% short-term rental community impact fee has done in the other towns?
In terms of how much income it's produced?
Yes, and if they've been able to effectively use those funds?
I think they're just collecting them now, what I understand. We're working in Truro and Wellfleet, and I think they know the numbers they're getting in, but I don't think they've have access to the funds yet. Someone can correct me if you know something I don't.
So it's going to take me a little bit to digest this because I want to think about what's most actionable on the list of items. But my one concern with number 4, with the incentivizing landlords for renting year round, my concern is the ability to actually have landlords take advantage of this due to the fact that cash flow, just coming from a lending standpoint, cash flow is much, much higher on the short terms. I don't know if the tax break would be very enticing for them. And also considering many of these landlords, when they own multiple properties that are short-term rentals or year-round rentals, they put them in an LLC and already receive tax breaks. So that's my one concern with the tax break for year-round rentals. But I do think the one that I think is most interesting for Barnstable is the seasonal or second homes at a higher rate. Because I remember from your report, I believe it was 30% of homes in Barnstable are seasonal and second homes. And from a lending perspective, from what I see from clients that purchase second homes, they have a lot more assets to where taxing them at a higher rate, it's, I can't speak for all of them, but it would be more affordable and for them, just coming from my perspective.
Yeah, I think that's where we were thinking as well. It becomes a bit more of a progressive tax policy for those who are able to afford a second home. Not that, I'm sure many of them wouldn't consider themselves to be necessarily hugely wealthy, but they are in a better position to afford. Yeah. So maybe not the tax break to landlords, just in terms of, is it ultimately going to be effective? I think it's a good question, because they make a pretty good.
I think that's a good question, but I'd still be in support of it. There are plenty of smaller landlords and people that don't advertise their rentals that would, or maybe interested in something like that, depending on the tax break.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thought that maybe that's something we're able to target toward, not toward the sort of investment scale landlords, but maybe it's a program for the smaller, maybe they only have one or rental properties or something. Okay, so that's some great feedback. Are we ready to move on to the remainder of the planning, policy, and zoning ideas?
I have a quick question. This is Hilda. I wanted to ask, have we identified lands that the town is owning, and are we able to use any of those land space that are owned by the town to do any form of construction or to help with these different initiatives that we're talking about? Have we gotten that far?
Yeah, And when we get into the local initiatives, we'll have a couple of suggested locations for town-owned land. Yep, that's definitely one of the strategies.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so for the rest of the more regulatory strategies, there's continued rezoning effort to allow development of small, low-density, village-scale, mixed-use and multi-unit development and redevelopment in village centers, especially Hyannis, but we also bring in Centerville in here, including implementing the drafted form-based code zoning by the Hyannis Growth Incentive Zone. So I know that's seems like it's pretty ready to go, but it does need to get implemented. So hopefully that's something that will be able to be accomplished in the next 5 years. Yes, I see Paula's.
Do you mean small, low density or high or mid density? Because I think that we have low density housing right now. So what exactly are we trying to achieve with this particular strategy?
So I think I guess we need to define what we mean by low,
Right.
low density and mid density.
Well, and even small. I mean, what are we talking about here?
So when I think of small, I'm thinking of somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,500 foot range, and that might be a cottage, it might be a condo, it might be an apartment, and it might be in a again, it could be a duplex, it could be a townhome, it could be something of in a quad format or very small, or it could be in a but we're talking kind of the missing middle here. That so-called jargon of the missing middle here, and putting it where near your town centers, so it helps revitalize the village centers, and that's also where you tend to have sewer. It's a smart growth location and that kind of thing. And we're also talking sort of the top of shop model where you might have some retail below, and then you might do some residential above of like 1 or 2 stories. So nothing really above maybe 3 stories is what we're.
Yeah, that jumped out to me as well. I think the village scale captures the small, low density intent there, and that language could just be strict.
Nope, I gotta go.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so the next strategy is strengthening the zoning bylaw for missing middle and so-called living little forms of housing. There's a report out by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council that I think actually could apply nicely, even though you're not in that region. It's a helpful report explaining what they mean by living little, and it has different typologies of things. So that's why I kind of use the quotes there, and we can refer to it when we actually get into the description strategy. But basically, we decided to go bold here. We're proposing allowing duplexes by right in all zones, with a restriction on overall massing, scale, and appearance as a single family home, and allowing tiny homes in compliance with Appendix Q of the 2018 International Residential Code. So tiny homes, there are some tiny friendly communities in Massachusetts, and they are legal. We did a little digging into it, but you do have in your local zoning code, allow them under, and they have to comply with the Appendix Q. And then allowing cottage cluster housing on lots of an acre or more. So on an acre, you're not going to fit a whole lot of cottages on there, but you might, fit some. You can get a cottage on 5,000 square feet if you're clever about it, and do shared septic and shared parking. So, then the next one is to strengthen the inclusionary bylaw, so where you're requiring capital A affordable units, and by requiring either a higher percentage of affordable units or a deeper level of affordability, and allowing expedited permitting, zoning relief, density bonuses, and financial subsidy for development to provide affordable housing beyond what is required, and also to increase in lieu of fees to keep up with the increased housing market. I do see a hand raised, so I'll pause there. I see Megan's hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the tiny home thing. I'm thrilled that that's in here, and I hope Barnstable does adopt Appendix Q as soon as it's possible. I just wanted to, for anyone that wasn't aware, tiny homes are 400 square feet or smaller. And I'm wondering about the 1 acre. I believe you could fit at least 2, possibly 3 tiny homes on maybe half to 3/4 of an acre. And I speak to that as somebody who's currently living in 300 square feet or less. So I would be curious where the 1 acre thing comes in, and just if it's possible to maybe bring it down to half or 3/4 of an acre.
Yeah, so that actually the allowing tiny homes, I have that as just as if you were building one at a time, like as you would a traditional single family home, only in this case it's tiny. The cottage cluster housing on acres of lots or more are designed as more of as a subdivision where you're building them all at the same time. And so you need a certain amount of space to be able to do, say, a shared septic system for all of them together and shared parking. They're kind of built as a unit. And I suppose you could do that possibly with tiny homes and build like a tiny home community. But I think oftentimes they're a little bit more, a person might, you know, I guess maybe you would know better than me if you research tiny homes, but it seems to me that they're less built as subdivisions and more built as for an individual person or individual household.
Yeah, I think it can be both. I've seen tiny home colonies, including to house formerly homeless in different parts of the country. So there are different models. We could look at that. I think of cottages as a little bigger than the tiny homes, so we could look at both of them.
Cottages are more like 900 to 1,400 square feet or something, and a tiny home is under, right, like under 900 for sure.
400 square feet by definition.
There you go. Okay, 400 square feet, very small. Yeah, and so they really don't need as much, but they will have to still have their septic figured out and things like that. And as far as I can tell, Appendix Q just means it has to be on a foundation, so it's not going to be the mobile form of a tiny home. All right, so the last one on this list for this bucket is amending the zoning to incentivize conversion of existing larger vacant or underutilized buildings to multi-unit housing for expedited permitting, zoning relief, and density bonuses. So in this case, this could be anything from, say, a larger home, like sometimes like a larger historic home that might be, many thousands of square feet, and sometimes you're able to preserve that historic home with certain tax breaks and things too, and it preserves that outward appearance of being this large historic home, but you might actually have like 4 apartments inside it. Or it could be a larger other kind of, this could even apply to something like a school or a large building that you retrofit. Doesn't necessarily have to be municipal. Any other thoughts on this bucket of strategies? So I will move. Any of these that you think, well, you can get back to me. It's probably a little too, so you're just seeing this for the first time. I was going to say anything we should eliminate, but it sounds like sounds like we're a little bit on the right track. So I won't.
Just quickly, because it wasn't mentioned, the tiny homes, will those be for ownership or will they be made into a community of rentals?
It's not determined. So I think under your zoning bylaw, you just allow them as a use. And then whoever was building them would, build them and either rent them or they would build them and live in them. Okay. So now we're in a new bucket of strategies. So this is the local initiatives and programs. So this is going to be a lot more about what we're making and where we might make. So we're going to pursue the creation of affordable year-round housing on vacant or underutilized private land or properties, such as motels, or I suppose that could be a hotel that goes up for sale. We heard about the vacant Kmart at the Cape Town Plaza as being an idea, Independence Park, the Cape Cod Mall parking lot, golf course, and others. And that may include land acquisition, or it could be financial subsidies to an affordable housing developer who wants to purchase it and turn it into affordable. And this is where we kind of crazy check these locations with you from what we heard. We obviously we haven't done any pre-development work on any of these locations, so some of these you may be like, that's never going to happen, we got to take that off. We're totally open, but these are the locations that we've heard in community engagement as ideas, private ideas. Yes, I see Paula, your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I can make these edits later, but the vacant Kmart at the Cape Town Plaza is not really going to be available for housing, both in terms of its proximity to the airport and the long-term ground lease that has been entered into, and with plans for commercial redevelopment.
Okay, keep that off. Non-start.
Is the golf course, is there like any particular golf course in mind, or is that just?
No, it wasn't clear in the feedback. I think you do
Okay.
have more than one, and some are maybe not even privately owned. But this is more of an opportunity, I think, because golf as a market, is maybe not so much in the Cape, but in general, participation in golf is declining. It kind of peaked in the 90s and 2000s, and now it's kind of going. And so sometimes it's just a phenomenon across the country. Golf courses are closing, and they aren't always financially viable. And sometimes that's a huge amount of vacant land that's on private ownership, that's often residentially zoned. And sometimes you get a bunch of McMansions that kind of pop up in these golf course communities. And so it's an opportunity to kind of look at golf courses, if they're golf courses you feel like might be in jeopardy, to kind of think of this. It could be even a zone, maybe there's a zoning strategy around that, but it's an opportunity to step in and see if it meets some of your housing needs, if there were an opportunity that arose. So to our knowledge, there's no motels or golf courses that are up for sale or anything at the moment, but it's one of those rare large parcels of land that's undeveloped that could go up for sale for housing, and you want to make sure it's going to go to the housing that's going to meet your needs.
Paula, I suspect that the conversation around Twin Brooks, which was timed with some of the outreach sessions, is what elevated that that land use as part of one of these strategies. But we can have our public discussion around that as we go.
Yeah, I was thinking it would actually be in opposition to that, not so much promoting it, but depends on who is attending what outreach.
Right.
Yeah, I suppose it goes on both sides, right? There's people who, would love it preserved as open space.
Right.
And there's ways to combine the two, where you can do housing on part and preserve the rest. Actually, that often is what happens, because you got to incentivize the preservation of space without. Okay. So we'll get your feedback on that later. I'd be interested to see if we can refine it. Okay, so the next one is negotiating an increased number of affordable units in future privately developed projects, or creating more deeply affordable subsidized housing inventory units in existing moderate income deed restricted units. So, okay, so translating that, this is where you have a development coming in that already is required to do a certain number of units, and you step in with some subsidies or otherwise and say, hey, here's some funding to put in, and you do more units. It kind of works in tandem with other kind of incentives, density incentives and things like that you can do in the zoning side. Or have a more moderate income deed restricted unit, maybe it's already for 80% or lower, and then you step in with some subsidies to say, okay, we're making more deeply affordable. We'll have it for 60% area median income instead of 80, something like that. Does that make sense? I'll interpret silence. Does it make sense? Okay, so pursuing, the next one is pursuing the conversion of available, now we're on the town side, okay, conversion of available town properties to housing, especially Marston Mills School. Then I listed the address there, and there was the, so the police station seems like it's a rather large parcel, and there's a piece of the police station parcel that looks like it's got some available land possibly. And so these were a couple locations that came up in our repeatedly and kind of the community conversation. So we wanted to elevate them into the strategy. But again, this is, where you kind of have to crazy check some of the suggestions. Okay, so the next one is acquiring properties for co-living housing for the town's seasonal employees or transitional housing for town employees to live in while searching for a permanent home in Barnstable. So in this case, it is proposing that the town have essentially its own transitional workforce housing, right, for its own seasonal employees or for town employees who need a place to be temporarily while they search for their own home. Which is a little, it's a little unusual because towns usually don't necessarily landlords, but I think that is what it's proposing here because it would be for your own employees or future. The next goal is utilizing local and state housing grant funds, and it has some suggestions here: the Community Development Block Grant Funds, or the American Rescue Plan Act funds, or Community Preservation Funds, to create local rental assistance program for eligible households. And the local rental assistance programs are often run where it's a temporary, essentially a temporary help. They might get 70% up to 70% or so of their rent covered for a matter of about 3 months, and then it sort of ceases. So there's some limits and things around it, and there's income restrictions and things around it. But to my knowledge, you don't have a local rental assistance program, but it seems like something that would be useful to many people in the community. And it's done as an emergency rental assistance program, at least during COVID. You actually didn't, you can make it for, if it's an emergency rental program, you didn't actually have to, it could be just for your own residents. It didn't have to be for a wider group of folks. But the rules may have changed now since COVID, so that would take a little bit of digging. Oh, any questions on this set so far? Oh, so this is now going to be the last set for the local initiative. You're folding together well. I know it's a lot. It gets a little. This is kind of a tedious meeting, but it's important. Okay, so here we're continuing efforts to streamline and coordinate the requests for local and federal funds for housing development. That's something that you already do in your housing and development office. Strengthening the coordination, funding, and integration of available social service, foreclosure prevention, and house stabilization programs for low-income rent residents and seniors who are in danger of foreclosure or homelessness. So this is really more about having some sort of resources to help with more about the coordination rather than actually providing the social service programs themselves as you as the town. It's about saving people who are in these moments of crisis, helping them connect with the resources that they're eligible for. Because there are resources there that might be local resources, but often state and even federal programs that they can tap into. So it's really helping them and hand-holding with them through and helping to navigate some of those programs, which gets very convoluted and challenging. The next strategy is continuing the rehabilitation program with community development block grant funds to help low-income homeowners preserve their existing housing to live independently and funding repairs to homes for health and safety. The next one is creating a pre-development or infrastructure, and I call it a relief fund, but we can talk about whether or not we should call it a relief fund. But it's basically you're funding pre-development work, or you're helping to fund infrastructure for affordable house. In this case, affordable rental units in particular is the prioritized group here. And using community development block grant and trust funds to help defray some of those costs related to development. But I feel like calling it a relief fund, I'm just even thinking out loud right now, almost sounds we're going to be giving, I don't know. I don't want it to sound like we're having giveaways to developers or something like that. But it's more about what things you can do on the town side to help smooth the way for the housing that you want to see, and partnering with affordable developers on the creation of rental units. And the last one is to continue to support wastewater management solutions to best address both housing needs and natural resource protection, incorporated in the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan, such as small scale on-site treatment plants and sewer expansion. So pretty much this is, you already have a whole plan around sewer expansion, and you're going to continue doing that. And this is about, supporting that, coordinating that with the housing needs and what housing opportunity development opportunities might be opening up with access now to sewer, as well as looking at some of the other models of small scale on-site treatment plants. So for example, in a cottage cluster scenario, you might have a shared septic in a small unit like that. And some of those more unconventional, but still totally doable situations for wastewater management. Any early thoughts on hearing those? So I think it's downhill from here. Okay. Yeah.
Just a process question. Is there going to be a connection of the strategies to goals? Generally, there are goals and then strategies for those goals. So these seem like they might apply for multiple goals.
Yes, definitely. So sometimes we've done it in two different, sometimes we'll have an actual goal and strategy matrix where we really tie in and show exactly which goals go with which strategies, and an action plan. I have also figured out a way to kind of combine them where you can talk about which goals they apply to and action. So there will be a matrix that demonstrates one way or the other which strategies apply to which goals, and that way you can really see where you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. If there's a strategy in there that's touching on all 5 goals and is doable, that's maybe one you want to prioritize over another. As so yeah, I guess. But I will also say it's not yet. That comes from the final plan once we have these fully vetted by the community.
Right. Will there be any time that certain number of units will be proposed as a goal?
Yeah. So on that note, the first goal you might remember is the production goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little tricky because right now we only have 2010 numbers, but we did look into the U.S. Census building permit data and just added up all the year-round house units that have been reported between 2011 and 2020. And I actually, I'd have to exit out of this for a second, have it in my notes. I figured someone was going to ask. So we have that as being projected at and totally best estimate we have, about 21,790 year-round housing units, which once in May, when that new denominator comes into play, the 2020 census is available, would drop your overall percentage of subsidized housing units from 7.2 to 6.8 in theory. I mean, it's all still pretty squishy, but which would, if you were looking for certification of your housing production plan, would be a production goal of 108 subsidized housing units in one year, or if you did the 1% kind of threshold, would be 217 subsidized housing units, which would get you safe harbor for 2 years.
So at some point, those numbers will be articulated in the plan?
Yep. Yeah, right now we're just, we're kind of at the list of ideas stage. So we know which list of ideas to then present to the public. And that's after that second community forum that then we start, okay, we know what we're doing, or we know what we're doing now. We know what the final goals and strategies are, and we can really start to elaborate on them and spell them out all out in the report, with descriptions and an action plan and who's responsible and so. I see Megan's hand is up.
Yeah, I have a conflicting meeting at 5, so I have to step out a few minutes early.
Okay, well, I'm glad you were able to come, Megan, and I look forward to any further thoughts you have when you have a chance to look at it. We'll send
Yeah,
out
I'll be sending over some thoughts about the whole thing, and thank you so much for putting this all together. I mean, so far I'm in support of just about all of it.
well, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so almost over. I think we're at the downhill portion now because we're on to the capacity education and coordination strategies, which is a real strength of the town. So a lot of these are keep doing what you're doing. Okay, so the first one of these is for the housing trust to do some extra outreach. I know they already have some NOFA out for 40 sort of friendly 40Bs, and this is really more about doing outreach to affordable housing developers and inviting them to friendly 40Bs at selected locations with financial incentives in the trust. So it's pretty much kind of keep doing what you're doing, maybe turn it up a little bit, see if there's some more targeted that you can do. And the next one is consider adopting best practices in coordinating and streamlining permitting processes to incentivize the creation of year-round and affordable year-round housing with increased efficiency. So that, that this is in way two ideas, but related ideas. One is really about just doing best practices around streamlining permitting. But there's also, we heard some feedback of wanting more resources, not that you're going to be training housing developers, but if there's a space on the town's website with more resources that others create, recorded webinars that are available, or sort of a simple easy flow chart for kind of how all this works, anything you can do to kind of provide a development handbook, with a particular emphasis on housing and affordable housing, because it gets so complicated. And if a developer, especially smaller ones, looking to maybe try to do some affordable housing, I think it can get very, very confusing. So, not only just do your streamlined development, but also resources available. I'm thinking on your website is where that was. And we can spell that out with some, when we do the full plan, every one of these strategies will have maybe some case studies, or it'll have a link of like resources. And so we'll give you some ideas on how to get started. And the next one is just, continue monitoring the compliance for your year-round affordable housing. That's an easy one. The next one is to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the trust, other boards and committees, and town staff. There could be opportunities to invite the trust to attend, permitting meetings, for example, at key moments, and getting feedback from them early on whether or not there's opportunities for funding kind of early in the process. There's a model that Concord does that I think is a really unique model, but they have it's called a house roundtable, and I thought that could be an interesting model for Barnstable, where you have all these different groups all working toward housing, but it's once a quarter kind of sitting down together and talking through housing needs and housing priorities and implementation kind of together. And it just helps with communication and coordination among all the different groups that do housing work. And the next one is to participate in CAPA's municipal engagement initiative. They can come out and help with some of this advocacy building this in sort of building your constituencies and advocacy for housing. And that goes hand in hand with fostering outreach and education about local and regional affordable housing needs through a positive public relations campaign. There's already been some work, I think, good examples that we've used in other communities about work that's been done around public relations campaigns in other communities, and so there's lots of interesting ideas to pull together for that. But this is a group that can help add some capacity to help town with. Okay, any early thoughts on those ones? Those are easy. All right, so the next one.
Just a quick question on your experience with other communities where there are trusts. How does the trust usually view the housing production plan? Is that an integral part of the way they make their decisions on their funding decisions, or is it usually a completely separate?
Yeah, Paul, that's a great question. So I would say that it should be, if I could say this, an integral part of, when we create the action plan, we'll identify what are things the trust could be lead on and what are things the trust could be supportive on. And those would be really important for the trust to pay attention to. And then if the trust is going to be creating its own action plan, it would take those ideas and integrate them into their own action plan, figure out how much money do I need to support this initiative, or how much bandwidth do I need? Do I need, other capacity, staffing, et cetera, and figure out how to implement that. But when we write action plans for trusts, one of the first documents we look at is there a recent HPP, and what does it say the trust is going to be doing in the next 5 years? And then we integrate that into the discussion about the action plan. Well, how are you going to do that? Where's the money coming from? What kind of capacity do you need? So there's nothing mandating that they look at it or that they do that, but I would say that is the best practice.
I'm thinking in particular of if you're looking at trying to increase the number of units on your SHI and proposals come forward for funding that would be a net zero, because the funding would be used either to renovate existing SHI, could that be something incorporated into the housing production plan?
That the trust would provide subsidies to help make those numbers work? Is that what you're saying?
No.
That following you.
If the larger goal is to increase, the units that qualify for being on the subsidized housing inventory, then that might be a criteria that the trust would consider on whether a proposal that they're reviewing increases or it's a net zero.
I think that's right. Although the way so far we're looking at the goals here is not just about the SHI. And so, the trust has to be careful about what it's eligible to fund, but I think that this plan, unless it changes the way it's shaping up, is going to be more nuanced than just creating the SHI units. So I don't know if that's helpful to you, but I think that the trust could focus on just SHI if it was, more directed to do that.
And I'm just, this is a slight editorial comment, but my understanding is the housing production plan is supposed to be about units that are considered affordable. And it's not to discount the much larger needs that the community have, but the production plan itself is really geared toward those units that would qualify for SHI.
Not solely though.
Not solely, okay.
DHCD, the guidelines, you have to address you have to have a plan for how are you going to achieve 10% and how are you going to maintain that? That's clearly has to be part of this plan, but it also wants you to look at housing diversity and housing options and your local needs based on your comprehensive needs assessment. So you really can go into these other areas that don't create SHI units.
And there are some communities that do housing production plans when they're already above 10% or even well above 10%, because it's just helpful for them to think through housing production.
Right. I just know that it's there's a lot of goals and strategies in here, and how to be focused, and making sure that we are also, that we really are increasing affordable units, even at the same time we're considering other housing, options that we need to bring into the community. So
Well,
Yeah, that's a great policy observation, Paula. Some communities we work with have a statement saying that our priority is to get to the to 10% and maintain
Right.
it. And so if it's a choice between one or the other, we're going to spend our money and time creating SHI units. And it's a very clear directive that they want to put in to the plan. So other communities don't want us to put that kind of directive in and want to work on both of, lots of different things. And so that's really a local policy decision. And we would take your guidance from you all and from the community on how you want us to approach that.
yeah, we also don't have to just stay with 3 buckets. We can have a 4th bucket that's only about SHI production or something like that. So, and we can kind of funnel some of those right into even a separate category of strategies to put a special emphasis on that goal if you think that.
So I'm curious, have you run the numbers in terms of what our SHI is right now? I mean, is that data available, or that been published anywhere as part of this housing needs and housing production plan process?
Yeah, well, you're at 7.6%. I think the trick is that right now the state has as their sort of denominator of year-round housing units is still from 2010, and we're well away from 2010 now. And so everyone's waiting with bated breath for when the year-round census data drops in May 2022, and no one really knows ultimately what that final number is going to be.
Right.
But we can project somewhat because we have the census sort of building reported building development units produced in each individual year between then and now, and so we can kind of come up with at least a range of what we think it might be for this plan, so we can put some kind of range of numbers around for you. And
Right.
I talked about that a little bit earlier, our kind of first. Well,
I'm actually more interested in the raw numbers, not the percentages, because I know that, we have created affordable units primarily through our inclusionary programs. Actually, some of the, I guess, village, I don't know if some of our true 40B projects were captured in the last housing production plan, or if they would be new units in this plan. But I know we also have lost several units in our accessory affordable program. And I'm really curious to see the trends in terms of, what affordable units we actually have created and lost in the last 5 to 10 years. And I just don't know if this plan, some part of it will have that discussion or that information.
So we don't necessarily go into that level of detail, what units kind of came on and off over the course of the last 5 years. We sort of talk about where the units are now and where we think they'll be in the next 5 years, but we can have some, discussion. I can work with and see if we can find some of that historical last 5 years SHI data, and yeah, I think that's important to understand, especially for accessory apartments, how many are no longer on the rolls. So I can make a note.
And Laura, I can provide you with some of that data after some recent monitoring that the town has done.
Okay, great.
Well, I think it's important to know, because it will direct us to which policies we really might want to focus on. Because if we've lost a lot of units in the accessory affordable program, what are the reasons for that? Would a tax incentives have eliminated some of that, or is it natural attrition because of change of ownership? I think, and now we have a by right ADU bylaw. Is that going to lead to conversion, and are there ways to prevent that? So anyway, I think sometimes the devil's in the details, and the more data points we know, the more we can refine our strategies to be helpful.
And Laura, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I don't know what the protocol is in this committee for making public comment. I'm not a member of the committee, so I'll just go unless someone tells me not to. Just a few things I think I was going to bring up. What Paula brought up, the fact that the HPP is supposed to be is defined in the guidelines as, a proactive strategy for developing affordable housing. That being said, the town is also working to update the comprehensive plan, which does have a housing section, which does, incorporate more than just affordable housing. So I'm wondering, one, if you're coordinating in that, if someone's coordinating that effort between the, I know it's two different consultants, the housing portion of the LCP and the HPP, because in the past they haven't always meshed. Secondly, I am a member of the trust, and I'm wondering if you are going to do a similar presentation to the trust, or have some directed input from the trust. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry. Why don't I just talk about the first two that I mentioned first, so I can hold them in my head. So there is a public comment period, and whether or not I don't know, maybe Jen can chime in. I don't know that we have a specific separate presentation to the trust scheduled, but there might be an opportunity to do a joint meeting or a joint presentation of some sort.
Yeah, I think we can look at that. Sorry, I turned my camera off. I'm eating my dinner very quickly because I have another meeting to go to after this. I think that we could make that work. Laura, are they meeting on Zoom or would it be in person?
The meeting on Zoom.
Yeah, that's a lot easier. So count us in if you want to schedule us for a time that's convenient and we can come in and share this as well. The public forum is going to be on the 30th. I don't know if we can fit it in before that because of the holidays, but if we can, we're happy to try to do that.
Yeah, I know that there's not, we were trying to get a meeting before our next meeting on December 2nd, and we couldn't do it. Right? So,
Okay.
I will say that the trust is made up of the town manager, the assistant town manager, the town treasurer, the former executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, and me. So there's just 5 members, but it would be good to have them put their housing hats on.
Yeah, that would be great. We're happy to do that if you just want to let us know what schedule works.
Yeah, I'll let
In
our
terms of the comp plan, Judy and I have both reached out, and we haven't been able to coordinate yet when we're going to talk about this. But we've both been trying to do that. We just saw her a few weeks ago, actually up in Maine, and we probably should have just grabbed her and talked about it then. But yes, it's on our list of things that we also agree should be done. And we actually don't know what phase the comp plan is in at the moment. Do you know what phase they're in? Does anybody know?
Ryan should know.
Yeah, they're currently in the public outreach phase and existing conditions compilations.
Okay, so they're pretty early, so they could really take the results of the HPP and hopefully use that when they start to create strategies down the road, but even informing the vision. So yeah, Laura, we should probably set up a Zoom meeting with Judy and her staff or whoever's working on the comp plan. And I don't know, Ryan, if you want to be involved in that, but whoever wants to, I'm happy to open that up. It would be a daytime kind of thing.
Sure, yeah, we can help facilitate that.
Yeah, they reached out and we're happy to give them the information. We were like, we can't quite give it to you yet because it hasn't been actually vetted by you all yet. So we want to make sure we're sharing the right stuff. So, okay, we're nearly there, and I know I don't want this meeting to go too much longer. So I think we are almost at the end. I will stop my sharing here. The only other thing to bring up is the community forum, which is coming up in just a few weeks. And we have some outreach materials that we prepared that we would really love to get your help in getting the word out very far and wide. So as a follow-up to this meeting, I will send Ryan, I can send Ryan the outreach materials. I'll send the presentation that we've just given. It's been recorded too. If we could just get your help as sort of homework on not only reviewing the kind of goals and strategies, and we'll send that in the, it's a one pager, maybe it's more than one page actually, about strategies, but we'll send the outline in a Word document so you can mark it up and the presentation. So.
And as any members of the committee have questions or comments or feedback that they want to provide after you have a chance to digest all of this, feel free to send it to me. I will compile all of that and share it back with the consultant team.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our portion unless there's any more thoughts that you have.
I have one question. Will this presentation be available on the website or somewhere where I can see it? Yeah.
Yes, I'll get it uploaded to the Housing Production Plan Update webpage.
Okay, thank you.
So I think handing it back to Hilda, if there's any additional public comment that anyone has, that would be the next agenda item.
Okay, we want to thank JM Goldstone presentation was very informative, and my first time seeing the agenda, your presentation, so I'll have to do some homework to go over what was said and to see where we can make different suggestion or compromise what's going on and have a plan of action ahead to work together to see what we can do with housing in our town of Barnstable and beyond. At this moment, we're gonna ask if there's any public comment. Oh, if there is none, our next committee meeting date is on December 14th. And at this time, items not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of the meeting. We'll move forward that this meeting be adjourned and look forward to meeting on December 14th.
Hilda, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Is that meeting on Zoom or in person?
In person. Right, Ryan? Is that what we plan on?
It's currently intended to be in person. Do you need some flexibility, Jen, with your team? We could do it by Zoom again.
It is a little easier for both of us to attend if it's on Zoom, if that's possible, but we don't want to inconvenience, you all. So it's up to you.
How about Hilda, you and I can talk about it after the meeting, see what the feedback has been on the Zoom format here in terms of public engagement, and then we'll circle back with Jen on how to schedule that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Can we move that the meeting be adjourned?
Donald or Emily,
So
can we
moved.
get a second? Or Lori?
Yeah, so moved.
Removed.
Did we get a second?
Yes,
Okay.
Lori seconded.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paula. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.